Welcome back, sea cucumbers. That's like my new favorite term of endearment now because it means even if you're just laying around doing nothing, you're lovable. You're doing great. So today, I thought maybe I would share my journey, my little spiritual hero's journey that I feel like I've been on for the past decade. I'm going to try and make it not super detailed and long, but I don't think I've ever really shared it all in one go before. And I know now I'm going to be talking about more woo spiritual ideas because that's what's been on my mind and heart a lot lately. And I don't want to give my listeners who have been with me for a while too crazy of whiplash. Although, if you know me, if you listen to me, whiplash is just part of the journey here. But I know my Just Be Your Best Self has largely been built on my rebellion against leaving religion. That's what it stemmed from. And so I think that's one of the reasons it's been tricky for me to navigate coming back, because I'm coming back in such a different space than where I started. So I just want to take you all on that journey with me. I got my lighter, I got a candle. I'm just gonna cozy up and I'm gonna tell you a story. There, my sweet little dirty but really yummy smelling candle is now lit. So, I was raised LDS, Mormon, in a really good family. In the military, my dad was a doctor, my mom was a teacher, I was homeschooled. Maybe we won't go that far back. I was raised Mormon, true believing, wanted to do everything right, be good, be righteous, become some, I don't know, leader in the church. I wanted to be well respected. I wanted to teach the gospel. I wanted to learn ancient languages so that I could study scriptures in their original languages. And I loved nothing more in the church than to read my scriptures, write in my journal, go to like religious classes, and then do what I do best, which is meaning make and pattern find. And I would read the Doctrine and Covenants and the Bible, and then I would study other religions and a little bit, not a lot, because Mormonism is a lot by itself, but a little bit. I would get into documentaries on string theory and physics, and my brain would just make all of these connections about how the nature of spirituality and truth and light and God, and I just felt like I was this channel for like wisdom when it came to the scriptures and religion, and it was a really big part of my identity. I went to a church school. I went to BYU, Idaho, which was really a very strict church school, to the point where like we couldn't wear leggings because it was considered immodest. We had devotionals every Tuesday. Every class started with a prayer. This was in college. We had really early curfews. We had in our apartments, no boys were allowed past what they called the chastity line. The chastity line was where the hallway back to the bedrooms went. And we were college, like these are 20-something-year-olds being monitored this strictly, and which was not enjoyable even for me, who was a rule follower. It felt a little patronizing and I didn't love it. But I did it because I was a rule follower and because I felt like there was meaning behind it. And again, I loved the spiritual aspect of it all. Fast forward toward the end of my college days, I had family members leave the church, which I won't go into their stories because those are their stories to tell, but that was really hard on me. And in a lot of ways, it made me double down in religion. And because now I had a family to bring back. And then I got married when I was 23. And I got married to my husband, Elliot, who had been divorced, and he had a son, and I just really, I don't know, I prayed about it. It felt like the right thing to do, to come in and heal this man who'd been divorced and be there. I have a history in my family of rescuing, and so I think this fit really well into my identity to come rescue this man and his son who just had their hearts broken. And we got married in the temple, an LDS temple, which is a trip all by itself. And from the get-go, marriage was really hard on me. I had never had sex before marriage. Like, I barely had French kissed before marriage. So I would say that the sexual side of marriage was fairly traumatic. And then on top of that, this feeling that I had essentially sacrificed all of my dreams, my hopes and dreams, to fulfill my calling as a wife and a mother, which was what I had always been taught was my calling, right? But that was really hard on me. And I got really resentful really fast. But because it didn't fit with my identity to get a divorce, because that would make me like a bad person, or I couldn't fulfill my calling, and I was supposed to rescue this man and his son, whom I loved, I just couldn't. I couldn't leave. I couldn't walk away. I didn't feel like I could and keep my identity as a good person intact. So I stayed. I got really depressed, borderline suicidal, and didn't feel seen, didn't feel appreciated. Felt like it was my job to keep the house clean, feed everybody dinner, start like family rituals. Like, I wanted to be that traditional wife and mom. I was also working, and I was also hyper depressed. Hyper and depressed probably don't go together, but very depressed. And the way that I thought I would fix it was to have a baby. Classic. That maybe a baby would help me feel like I belonged and like we were a real family, and somehow it was going to make things better. Spoiler alert, it didn't. I love my baby. She's now 9. But I think I probably also struggled with postpartum depression, feeling like then I also gave away my body and, in a lot of ways, my autonomy. It just felt like as I lived this life that I felt like I was supposed to live, the life that was going to make me a good person, it felt like the more I tried, the more myself, my autonomy, my happiness, my joy got stripped away layer by layer. And somehow I was supposed to be happy with that. Because that's what, I mean, in the church, we call it the plan of happiness. The plan of salvation is to fulfill these roles and have a family and do this whole Mormon checklist thing. But the harder I tried and the more in I got, the sadder I felt. And when I was pregnant, while I was pregnant with my baby, this was about a year and a half, maybe 2 years into my marriage, I read what's called the CES letter, which is essentially a letter that someone wrote just questioning a lot of the things taught in the church. It's very earnest, it's very honest, and it's a lot. It's a lot to get through. And by the time I was done reading it, I had already been struggling with some aspects of church and religion. But by the time I was done reading this letter, it was like I knew that this church I was raised to believe it was the one true church, that it wasn't what I had been taught that it was. I felt so betrayed. I felt stupid. I felt, oh gosh, it was hell. It was a dark night of the soul. It felt like the floor had been dropped out from underneath me. I'm going to go ahead and read you a blog post that I wrote at the time. It's on a blog that literally has this post and one other post, and I don't think anyone has ever seen it. This was a few weeks after I stopped going to church, a few months. So I think I stopped going to church in like December when my baby was born, and I wrote this in June. I titled it Coming Out, because that is very much what it felt like to tell people that I wasn't going to church anymore. It felt like a coming out. Ironically, I never posted this, so here I am, finally, 10 years later, coming out to you. Here's what I said. I don't believe that the LDS Church is the one true church anymore, and I'm scared. I'm scared because there are people whom I love who will see me differently if they find out. They will think I've fallen away, that I've been deceived, that I've lost sight of the truth, or even that I have let Satan have power over me. I'm afraid that extended family members will pity me, that they'll think I've lost something of great worth, that they'll think I no longer value my family, or that I've betrayed them in some way. I'm afraid that they will blame my parents for my lack of faith, and that they will resent my parents for being a bad influence on me. I'm terrified that I will break my grandparents' hearts. I'm worried that well-intentioned church leaders and ward members will think they've failed me in some way, or that they'll feel like failures in the future when all of their best efforts and prayers don't bring me back to the fold. I'm sad that they'll pity my husband, who has already gone through so much and stayed faithful in the church despite struggles with his first marriage. I don't want to be looked at as another trial that Elliot has to go through, or worse, an influence he has to resist, but I'm afraid that's how people will now view me. I'm afraid of friends turning into pseudo-friends, that instead of just wanting to talk and be with me because I'm a fun person to talk and to be with, that they will pride themselves in the idea that perhaps if they are loyal to me through this phase, they will be the one to help me start believing again. I'm also afraid that I'll push people who truly love me away because I'm paranoid that they have a church-related agenda. I've already started doing this. I'm scared that I will lose the respect of my community, that my students will pity me and wonder what sin I committed that led me out of the church. That instead of thinking of me as a good teacher, an upstanding member of the community, or a good mother and wife, that now, if people think things about me at all, it will be with the tag, "It's too bad she doesn't believe in the church." I will be labeled one of the foolish virgins, a tare sifted from the wheat, or, in Elder Holland's recent words, a taffy puller. Most of all, I'm afraid of the not knowing. I don't know the church is true, that Thomas S. Monson is a prophet, that Joseph Smith saw God the Father in Jesus Christ. I don't know if there is a God or an afterlife, or that everything will be sorted out in the end. I feel like the floor I've always stood on just disappeared from beneath my feet, and I'm free falling into the abyss. Some people like the idea of skydiving or bungee jumping. I'm not one of those people. I'm just so thankful that I have people to hold on to as I fall. I'm not a rebel. I've always been more of a goody two-shoes conformist, and I'm not excited about being this different from the people and the culture who have for so long defined me. However, I value honesty and authenticity, and as terrifying as it is to be open with where I'm at, it would destroy me to continue to pretend to believe in something that I no longer have the ability to believe in. It's not my intention to hurt anyone. I have not been offended by someone in my ward. I'm not leaving the church in order to accommodate a sinful lifestyle. Well, at least I didn't think I was leaving to accommodate a sinful lifestyle. Sins came later. Just kidding. I don't believe in sin. I'm still a good person. I am still a spiritual person. I'm still a truth-seeking person. I still believe in being honest, true, chaste, benevolent, virtuous, and in doing good to all men. I still seek after anything that is virtuous, lovely, or of good report or praiseworthy. I still believe in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law. I'm simply claiming the privilege of living according to the dictates of my own conscience. Here is what my conscience dictates: that polygamy is wrong, and that a loving God would not have condoned the deceit, manipulation, spiritual blackmail, and even abuse that the practice of polygamy often fostered. That racism is wrong, and that a loving God would have quickly revealed this to his prophets rather than letting them teach that blacks were Satan's representation on earth. That this life matters, and that helping and loving living people is more important than doing rituals for dead ones. That loving and spending time with my family is more valuable than creating handouts for a young women's lesson. That if we have a loving heavenly Father, we would also have a loving heavenly Mother, and she would want us to know her, to turn to her, and to acknowledge her existence. I don't think she would care to be kept sacred. What mother wants to be protected from her own children? That people make mistakes, and that they should own up to them and apologize for them, not pretend that they never happened, or worse, claim that they were acting under inspiration from God. The church needs to own up to its mistakes and then work to become better. That church should be a place where we go to feel loved, not to feel judged. That if the LDS Church is God's only true church, and the only way we can confirm that is through the Spirit, then people would not receive spiritual confirmation that Buddhism, Catholicism, Islam, or a multitude of other religions are correct. That truth is what remains after a belief is put through the ringer. That we shouldn't believe something is true just because it feels good and then blatantly ignore any evidence to the contrary. In the words of Tim Minchin, we must think critically and not just about the ideas of others. Be hard on your beliefs. Take them out onto the veranda and beat them with a cricket bat. Be intellectually rigorous. Identify your biases, your prejudices, your privilege. I no longer want to spend my life worrying about what I need to do to get into the celestial kingdom. I don't know if there's an afterlife or not, so I want to make this life count. I want to love my gay friends without pitying them for going against God's will. I want to admire the tattoos of friends and family without worrying that they've destroyed their temple. I want to let people make choices for their own life without any damning judgments from me. I want to have the freedom to make good choices without the feeling of obligation, to make mistakes without punishing myself with guilt. I hope to be generous to others in my thoughts, words, and actions. I hope to live a good life full of love. And if there is an afterlife, and if there is a God, I will tell him I lived by the dictates of my conscience. And if I'm shut out of the pearly gates for that, then I think I'd be happier in hell. This moment in time was for me my leaving the Garden of Eden, my leaving the Shire and going into the underworld. And I want to take a minute to familiarize everyone with the format of a hero's journey, because this is a concept that you'll see repeated over and over again in movies, in literature, in even poetry. It's just a very archetypal, universal journey. And I'm going to simplify it a lot. There's a lot of really cool details that are interesting to dive into. But essentially, at the beginning of the story, the hero starts in a place of innocence and naivete. So in Lord of the Rings, you've got the Shire, Star Wars. Oh, I shouldn't bring Star Wars in. I don't know whatever, Tatooine, maybe? I'd be really surprised if I got that right. Whatever planet Luke starts on. Or in Little Mermaid, she's in the ocean with her family. And then something happens to call the hero outside of this above world, innocent state and into a type of underworld where they have to complete various initiations. And I'll continue explaining the hero's journey as I continue with my hero's journey. But this point for me, for my hero's journey, was the leaving of the Garden of Eden, of that state of innocence and safety and everything is okay in the world, was when I decided to leave the church. And I think I'm going to end the story there for today and continue on tomorrow. But I want to just send love to you, to wherever you are at in your own hero's journey. I think we all go through multiple hero's journeys in our lifetimes. And sending you love. As always, no matter where you're at in your journey, you're enough, you're lovable, just the way you are. And I'm going to leave you there, blowing out the candle.